This is the Sunbelt. It stretches across about 18 US states, and if you're like me, you probably think its sunny, belt-like name means this strip of states have the most sun and therefore use the most amount of solar power, right? Well, not really. In fact, it's some of the least sunny US states that have the highest amount of solar power. And I'm sure you'll be as surprised as I was to learn that the reason for this is driven by greed and politics that strangely all begins with air conditioning. You see, the US is made up of several different climate zones. The ones in the north are typically cold and bring unbearably long and cold winters, which we convince ourselves we enjoy. On the other hand, southern states are made up of warmer climate zones that get really hot and humid. How hot and humid? Well, hot enough that temperatures can reach over 100 degrees Fahrenheit, the average humidity levels are over 85%, and southerners use expressions such as "it's so hot you can scald a lizard" and "it's hotter than a blister bug in a pepper patch." With such descriptive expressions, I'm sure you get the idea. The climate in these areas of the country is hot and uncomfortable, at least without air conditioning. Before the widespread use of air conditioning, only about 25% of the country lived in Sunbelt states. Once air conditioning was more widely used, closer to 50% of the country lived in Sunbelt states, showing not just an increase in population of Sunbelt states, but how air conditioning led to a greater favorability among the nation's population towards living in them. Over a couple of decades, air conditioning helped to make the South more comfortable to live and work. Air conditioning even helped people with heat-sensitive medical conditions to live longer. Over time, major cities developed, economies grew, culture developed, and the sun was shining. Okay, so the South is hot and air conditioning makes it not hot. Where are you going with this? Well, when you look at the amount of solar power each Sunbelt state has, it strangely matches pretty poorly with something known as solar insolation. Solar insolation is measured in watts per square meter and represents the amount of solar energy falling on a square meter of land. The more energy that falls on a single square meter, the more solar energy you could potentially make use of. States in the southern part of the country, including those in the Sunbelt, typically have high levels of insolation compared to the states in the north, but don't have equally high uses of solar power. Take Maine, for example. Maine is one of the most northern states in the country and has one of the lowest solar insolation levels in the country. As of 2022, Maine had a total of 722 megawatts of solar across the state. Louisiana and Mississippi, which have higher insolation levels, only have about 745 megawatts combined. And this isn't the only example. Connecticut has more solar power than Alabama, Virginia has more than South Carolina, and Minnesota has more than New Mexico. Now you might be thinking, okay, that's great, but what if we account for population? After all, some states have more people than others, and solar power isn't going to be developed in sunny states just for the cactus. Cactuses? Cacti? Virginia has more people and cacti than South Carolina, so that possibly explains one instance. However, Maine has less people and cacti than both Louisiana and Mississippi, and Connecticut has about as many people as Alabama. So as it turns out, the amount of sun and the human and prickly plant population isn't a good indicator for the amount of solar each state has. But why? Well, one clue we could look at is how solar is developed in each state. In general, states with high levels of solar have more residential solar, and states with little solar pretty much only have utility solar installations. So now the question is, why are some utility companies in Sunbelt states installing solar, but not residents? If you're someone with an eye for detail, you might finally start to see where I'm going with this, and suspect that utility companies could have something to do with what's going on here. I mean, what could a company who sells fossil fuel generated electricity possibly have against their customers switching to free, US grown and raised, clean solar electricity? And what does this have to do with air conditioning? Well, as air conditioning created a cooler place to live, it contributed to the demand for energy, both the power air conditioning as well as the new economy it helped create. Seeing a major business opportunity to generate and provide electricity for this growing demand, utility companies began to take over the electric grid. As solar and other renewables became less expensive, utility companies started to make more use of them. More importantly, states started to pass policies and incentives that, well, incentivized people and businesses to go solar. That is, except in some Sunbelt states, specifically the very states where solar use is mostly low unless it's owned by the utility company. Even more interestingly, the electric grid in these states is owned by a single utility company. Even more interestingly, these utility companies have been noted to de-incentivize solar by doing things like charging high fees to go solar, getting into scandals about denying climate change, and blocking policymakers from creating useful solar policies. So, what should you do if you live in a state with unfavorable conditions for home solar? Things like voting for political candidates who favor solar, choosing your utility company if possible, and lowering your use of fossil fuels by making an energy-efficient home are great places to start. However, if these aren't great options for you, check out Energysage. They have great options for going solar, including community solar, and will connect you to great solar providers in your area. If you do live in a solar-friendly state, Energysage will help you get quotes from multiple solar providers so you can find the best options and price for your home. If you want to learn more about going solar, check them out with the link in the description as well as our other videos. Thank you for watching. I'll see you next time.